James,
Yes, sir.
how are you, sir?
I'm doing very well. How about yourself?
I'm good. I'm good. Can I mute myself or unmute myself or no?
Yes, you can. And I made you an organizer so you can see who has the hand raised. But just mute and unmute and let Arthur and I run the show.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. But when I want to speak, I just push the hand signal.
Just unmute yourself. You don't have to raise your hand.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Perfect. Thank you, James.
You're welcome. Supervisor Desmond, do you want to give me a sound check, please?
Yeah, this is Miles Himmel, is communications person. Supervisor Desmond should be here in 5 or 10 minutes. So
Thank you, Miles, very much.
thanks.
And then Mayor Rebecca Jones, do you want to give us a sound check, please? Oh, you have to. Okay, we just sent you a pin. Oh. Mayor Jones, I notice your hand is raised. Arthur sent you a PIN number so that you could mute and unmute yourself on the phone.
Hello, this is Rebecca. Can you hear me now?
Mayor Jones, I can hear you loud and clear. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you.
James,
Yes, sir.
you still can't hear me? Okay. I just, when my report comes, I just start talking, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Excellent. Thank you for everything you're doing.
You're welcome.
Good morning. This is Ian Park Lynch from North County Transit District. Can you hear me?
We can hear you loud and clear.
Thank you.
Mayor Vasquez, you got your hand raised. You can unmute yourself. Go ahead and
Good
give us-
morning.
Good morning. Loud and clear. I will mute and unmute you. So leave.
Thank you.
Yeah. Mayor Bailey, will you give us a sound check, please?
Hi, everyone.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hey, Julie?
Yep. This is Julie.
Oh, never mind. Sorry.
Okay.
is really like pissing me off.
Testing. James, can you hear me?
James, Tessa, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Chair.
Thanks, Tessa. Are we ready to roll?
James, would you do a sound check with Mayor Wells, please? Just a reminder to the board members, they are all entered into the webinar in muted only, listen only mode. When you want to speak, you'll need to raise your hand and James will see your hand raised and call on you. I understand Vice Chair Blakespear would like to do a sound check. James, could you please work with her on that? Or Arthur? I don't know what happened to James.
Hello, this is Mayor Blakespear.
Perfect, we can hear you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Mayor Boss, this is John Kirk. I think we're at 9:03, and although we might continue to work out some technical difficulties, if you'd like, you may start.
Thank
And
you.
I just
Appreciate
want,
it.
Chair Voss, just
Go
to
ahead,
let you
Jessica.
know that our mission control, all of them are on, do not have sound at this moment. So the webinar itself, James, Arthur, none of them have any sound, and I'm not sure what the issue is. We're trying to work through it. And let me see. Let me make sure that we're
Doing a sound check. Can you hear me?
I can
yes,
hear you.
now we can.
Perfect.
James.
We solved the problem.
All righty, let's get going. Welcome to the April 10th Sandag Board of Directors meeting. I appreciate you all being here. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Get that flag up on the screen. There we go. Ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. Before we jump into the meeting, I will ask our clerk to confirm that we have a quorum. Tessa?
Yes, Chair Voss, we have a quorum. All 19 agencies are represented.
Perfect, thank you. As a reminder, please raise your hands to make comments or motions. Raise your digital hands. And please do not mute yourselves. Leave your little microphone button alone on your computer. Staff will unmute you once your name is called. With that, let's start with item number 1, approval of the meeting minutes. I'd be looking for a motion or a computer raised hand. Mr. Minto. We have a motion from Minto, a second from Sotelo Solis. Can we get them unmuted to officially make those motions?
I move. Minto.
Thank you.
I second. Sotelo Solis, second.
Thank you. We have any public comment on this? I'll take that as a no. Mayor Dedina. Mayor Dedina, is your hand up?
Sorry, yeah, Megan, this is Serge Dedina. It's for my member comment. I just wanted to shout out, first to all of you for the collective.
Okay. Hey, Serge.
Yeah.
Let's get let's get through the minute. I thought you had a comment on the minutes. We'll get back to you on member comment. Tessa, would you begin the roll call vote, please, to approve the minutes?
There are no public comments on the minutes. Councilmember Schumacher, City of Carlsbad.
Aye.
Mayor Salas, City of Chula Vista.
Mayor, you're self-muted.
Dallas, aye.
Mayor Bailey, City of Coronado.
Bailey, yes.
Supervisor Desmond, County of San Diego.
1 second. Supervisor, you're self-muted.
Okay, how about that? Sorry. All right. Supervisor Desmond, yes, sorry.
Mayor Haviland, City of Del Mar.
Haviland, yes.
Mayor Wells, City of El Cajon.
Mayor, you're
Self-muted.
self-muted again.
Step away from your self-mutes. Mission Control will handle it.
Mayor Wells, you may need to push the mute button to unself-mute. Okay, we'll come back to Mayor Wells. Vice Chair Blake Spear, City of Encinitas.
Blake Spear, yes.
Mayor McNamara, City of Escondido.
Yes.
Mayor Dedina, City of Imperial Beach.
Zadina, yes.
Councilmember Baber, City of La Mesa.
Councilmember, you're also self-muted.
La Mesa, yes.
Mayor Vasquez, City of Lemon Grove.
Mayor Vasquez, you're also self-muted.
Yes.
Mayor Sotelo Solis, City of National City.
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Feller, City of Oceanside.
Yes.
Chair Voss, City of Poway.
Yes.
Councilmember Moreno, City of San Diego.
Moreno, yes.
Mayor Jones.
Jones, yes.
Mayor Minto, City of Santee.
Minto, aye.
Councilmember Zito, City of Solana Beach.
Zito, yes.
And Mayor Ritter, City of Vista.
Yes.
Mayor Wells, did you manage to unself-mute? Are you on with us now? Do you want to text me? James, is he self-muted or are we just having connection problems?
No, he's self-muted. It does show that it's not up on his primary screen.
There we go.
John? Oh, there we go. Mayor Wells?
At this point, if we don't have Mayor Wells, we can move on, I believe.
Bill, can you hear us?
James, is he still self-muted?
He's unmuted now. I think he's having some technical issues.
He just texted
let's
me.
move. Okay, let's move on.
Can we register it that way? John, he says he can't hear.
Yes,
But
if he
said yes on the
communicated it,
minutes.
that's fine.
Yes, he communicated. City of El Cajon is a yes on the minutes. You can correct the slide after.
Tessa, can you announce the final result verbally?
Yes, my apologies. The minutes are passed unanimously.
Thank you. Now, Tessa, do we have any public comment to be read into the record?
We do not have any general public comments, Chair.
Okay. Supervisor Desmond, you had a comment?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, everyone. I just wanted to take this opportunity, and I think actually Mayor Hadina might also been or was going to do this, but I just want to take this opportunity to thank all of the county staff and the Health and Human Service Agency for the coronavirus response. You know, a lot has changed and progressed with the county dealing with the cruise ships, the borders, the health order with the feds and states. Testing results used to take, days. Now we're down to, less than an hour for getting these test results. Actions by San Diegans has been fantastic. Even though our numbers are up, the percentages of the people with the virus as compared to those tested has remained the same, and that's always been below 10%. So we're all doing a great job. I just want to thank all the leaders in the room, all the mayors and council members and everybody in all their efforts. We may not always agree on the health orders, but I just want everybody to know that the county has been doing things more out of an abundance of caution. And I wanted to thank everybody today from all the cities and entities in San Diego County here at the Sandag Board for all your efforts in fighting this virus, and your continued efforts will get us through this. And I just want to say thanks again to the county staff and their tremendous job they're doing in this effort. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Jim. Serge?
Yeah, I will echo Supervisor Desmond's comments, and just from the perspective of a small city on the border, I want to thank the county for its exceptionally strong leadership, our public health officer, all the public health and county health staff, as well as Sheriff Bill Gore's clear leadership on helping us implement those orders. It really played a significant role in helping us really contain this virus. We still have a long way to go, but I think San Diego has shown an exceptional job in collective leadership, all of us working together. I appreciate the role and partnership with all of our neighbors, Coronado, Chula Vista, National City, and especially San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulkner in San Diego, who've been really exceptionally helpful to Imperial Beach. So with that, I just want to say we have to keep it up. I would hope that in the next few weeks, we articulate a strategy of mass testing and then contact tracing and hopefully quarantine, so we can put a box around the virus and help us recover and move forward. But again, thanks to all of you, and especially the county and the state of California, very, very clear and impactful leadership. Thanks.
Thanks, Serge. Seeing no other member comment, we'll move on to item 3. PAC chairs, any reports to offer, please raise your hands, your digital hands. Seeing none, we will move on.
Gaspar has her hand up.
I'm sorry, Supervisor Gaspar. Looks like you're self-muted, however. There we go.
Sorry, I dropped you, so I don't need anything. Thank you.
Thanks. All righty, we will move on. No PAC chair reports. Tessa, any public comments?
There are no public comments on item number 3, the chair's report.
Thank you. Moving on to item number 4, Executive Director's Report. Hassan.
Thank you, Chair Vaz. Couple of things that are important for you to know. First, the Sandag team has been teleworking for more than 3 weeks now. I have been very impressed by the amazing Sandag staff who have adapted and acclimated to our remote work scenarios. We are meeting all schedules, keeping all projects moving forward on budget and schedule. The team has banded together to continue to make progress on important projects and programs for the San Diego region. Last week, our iCommute team hosted 2 telework-related webinars to help employers and employees in the region. I just wanted you to know that these are much better attended seminars than any time in the past. The recording of this webinar and other resources are available at iCommuteSandiego.com. If your organizations or companies in your jurisdiction need help starting or expanding telework program, the Sandag iCommute program is here to help you. You can reach them by calling 511 and saying iCommute. While our offices remain closed to the public, a few essential employees at the toll operation centers are continuing to take customer phone calls and ensure safety and maintenance of the roadway, while following social distancing guidelines and public health orders. We continue to monitor and follow federal, state, and county guidelines in our effort to stem the spread of the virus and flatten the curve. Legislative update, we are also monitoring the legislative and policy development in Sacramento and Washington, D.C. The California legislators was supposed to reconvene on Monday, April 13th, but announced last week that their recess has been extended until May 4th. Governor Newsom has made it clear that the state budget proposed in January is no longer operable. We will be watching closely to see what's released as part of the major revision of the May revision. Last week, we learned that AB 2062 Del Mar Bluffs long-term study will not move forward this year. In general, committee chairs have advised that only bills directly related to the COVID-19 response will be heard at this time. We will continue to engage our delegation on any other opportunities to find funding for these efforts this year. On March 31st, the President signed Part 2 of the Safe Vehicle Rules into law. This will impact us greatly when we determine our conformity and compliance. We will monitor and let you know if there is any direct impact to Sandag. Finally, we continue to monitor the stimulus conversation happening in Washington, D.C. Today, you're going to hear some good news about Sandag receiving $310 million from the transit stimulus that will be passed through to our 2 transit agencies. Conversation about a larger stimulus infrastructure project is being taking place. In anticipation of this discussion and to ensure that we are ready for future infrastructure stimulus bill, Sandag is developing a list of projects that could be shovel-ready in the next 18 months. We're compiling the list right now. It should be ready to go very shortly. This list will include major projects. I urge you in your respective city or county, if you have project local in nature that are shovel ready, to let us know, so we're ready to apply for whatever stimulus comes our way. Again, greatly encourage all of you to inform your staff so we receive any project that's shovel ready so we can apply for funding. I anticipate Sandag will be very successful if there is any stimulus package, because we have a lot of projects that are being cleared and designed and ready to go. On the regional plan, we look forward to presenting the vision to you when we can meet again in person. I communicated with Chair Vass and Supervisor Desmond that it will be better to do the vision in person when we get back together, and they both agree. We don't know when that is, but in the meantime, work is progressing, and we do not anticipate changes to the schedule for the plan to adopt in the fall of 2021. As we are looking at increasing telework assumptions for regional plan, staffs are surveying employers around the region to get a sense of how their workforce might adapt to teleworking long term, which we hope will increase the telework in the Sandag region. Central Mobility Hub and Navy Old Town Complex work is moving forward. Staff continue to study the potential for the Nabor site and a central mobility hub. As many of you have heard, Navy Secretary Thomas Modly has stepped down. Army Undersecretary Jim McPherson has been appointed to the acting position. Navy leadership assured us that this transition has not changed the Navy's enthusiasm and commitment to its partnership with Sandag. And at this time, I do want to thank Joe Stevenson and his team for continuing to partner with us. We are looking forward to working with the Acting Secretary McPherson to assist the Navy to secure its future in the San Diego and the defense of our nation. Del Mar Bluff update. With the recent rain around the county this week, thankfully, there have been no reported issues in the Del Mar Bluff. Sandag will continue to monitor the situation. Regarding the 2020 census, last Wednesday, April 1st, was Census Day. To comply with the stay-at-home orders, efforts have been focused on digital outreach and phone banking. The message remains it's safe and easy to complete the 2020 census safely at home, online, by phone, or by mail. About 50% of people in the San Diego region have completed the census so far, which is better than the statewide average of 46.2%. However, there is still room for improvement. Some of our communities still have low completion rates, between 5 and 30%. These communities are located all over the region, including rural parts of North and East County, Perry, Logan, Pacific Beach, and the College area. Sandag is working with the Count Me 2020 coalition of community-based organizations to encourage people in these areas to complete the census. We recently sent you a toolkit of resources like sample social media post, blog, and newsletter contact and poster. I encourage you to share this information with your communities to encourage them to be counted in the census. And finally, I want to add my thanks to the county staff, to our staff, for especially those who have to go to the work site, for continuing to serve San Diego. Mr. Chair, that concludes my report. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Hassan. Supervisor Desmond.
Thank you. Thank you, Hassan, for your report. You mentioned something about the Del Mar Bluffs. I don't know if it was a bill or something like that. I was just wondering, and I realize why the state's doing that to deal with the coronavirus, but I was just curious, what impact does that have on any of the, particularly the bluff stabilization process by what's being delayed at the state on the Del Mar Bluffs?
Yeah, thank you, Supervisor. So there were two parts to the Del Mar Bluff work. One is the short term, which is the stabilization of the bluff, which we estimated to do a try, it will cost about $100 million. And two is the longer term. And part of the shorter term, we have, and you approved in the last step, $3 million to study and look at long-term solutions. Assemblymember Tasha Borner was seeking $5 million more for a deep and in-depth studies for the bluff. That's the bill I'm talking about that's got delayed. I don't think any of the work that we're doing is going to be disrupted, but we probably won't have as an in-depth work as anticipated, and we're going to look somewhere else for funding. But both the short-term and long-term still on the table. The $5 million that were to be requested by the bill will not be happening.
Thank you, Hassan. Councilmember Schumacher, your hand was up. I don't see it up any longer. Did you have a comment?
I actually had the exact same question as Supervisor Desmond. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Tessa, did we have any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. We will move on to consent. In the interest of trying to streamline some of our votes for today's meeting, I want to propose that we move the consent calendar to the end of the agenda so that we have the option to add additional items to it for one final vote at the end rather than taking votes on each individual item. We would, for example, skip item 5 for now, go ahead and hear the presentations and have discussion on each of the reports on the agenda. But should there not be an objection, reserve the actual voting on each of those items until the end of the meeting. It'll help minimize the number of roll call votes we need to take while still allowing staff to present on each item and board deliberation and public comment to occur. I will give you a minute to see if there are any raised hands, questions on this approach, but I think it can save quite a bit of time. I see Mayor Salas, did you have a comment? You're self-muted at this point.
Yeah, I'm a little bit confused. So are you saying that we're going to take it and take the whole agenda item in one sweeping vote at the end? So what if we have split votes, say on item, for example, 9?
Well, we could certainly pull it from consent at the end. I think we have the opportunity to save a whole lot of time with roll call votes.
Okay, so then what you're saying is that we're going to hear the discussions in the order of the agenda presentation, but then if there is any vote that is going to be that would not be an affirmative I vote, then you pull it you pull that from the consent as is that how it's going to be?
Yeah, rather than doing each item.
Oh, okay. So if we're in agreement, so if everybody says, for example, we're all fine with 9, nobody pulls it, then it's part of the consent.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, I gotcha. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I see no other questions on that. Will allow us then to move on to item number 6, the COVID-19 forecast and development of draft fiscal year 2021 Sandag program budget. Andre, it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and good morning, members of the board. I am Andre Dujon, the Chief Financial Officer for Sandag, and presenting with me today is Ray Major, our Chief Economist. So at your last board meeting on March 27th, the Board of Directors was scheduled to review the draft fiscal year 2021 budget. However, due to the COVID-19 crisis, the board instead directed staff to return with updated funding assumptions based on the potential impacts of the current pandemic. Although the situation remains very fluid and there are still many unknowns, Ray will walk you through the data that we have gathered to date and give you scenarios of the potential impacts to our economy and our local revenues. I'll now turn it over to Ray, who will walk you through those scenarios.
Good morning, Chair Voss. Good morning, members of the board. This really is a time of unprecedented economic news. I haven't seen anything like this, nor has anybody in really the history of economic analysis. What we're running up against is data that is really unrecognizable. They're data that we really don't even know how to process. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that. But what it really means is that there is no way right now that we can do a single point forecast and give an exact number in terms of what our prediction might be in terms of the amount of revenue that we would lose due to the COVID-19 crisis. This is the first time in the history of the world that we actually voluntarily shut down the economy. This is a man-made disruption, and it will lead to an economic recession. The thing is that much of the economy is not broken. Most recessions, something is wrong. Either there's a financial crisis or some kind of a shock to the economy that throws us into a recession, and it usually starts with a sector. In this particular case, we shut down on our own. And so the recovery from this is going to be very unique, and that's something that we're taking a look at. There are 3 critical factors that we're monitoring on a very regular basis and we're looking at. And the first one is really the length of the disruption. You know, the good news is that the curve is flattening. We've heard that the peak has been brought forward, and we hear from the federal government that we might be able to reopen by May 1st. There are also reports that that might be on a county-by-county basis, but there really is no defined plan on how we reopen. That was yesterday. And then also yesterday, Federal Reserve Chair Powell said that the economy was deteriorating quickly, and that he didn't believe that we were going to open until after July. So the length of the disruption is really unknown. What we do know is that about half of our economy is based on the services industry. And the services industry requires people to interact with each other. By its very nature, it requires human interaction. And the severity of this particular disruption is going to be determined a lot on when we can actually get back to work and start working with each other. And that really means what happens with the social distancing and how we how that plays out over the course of the next weeks, months, and years. When we do come back, the question is what industries will be hurt the most and which ones won't. So we're looking at all of these things. In order to do that, what we've done is we've developed scenarios. We've developed a set of 50 scenarios in a dynamic model that we can take a look at that give us a multiple set of possible outcomes based upon the length, the depth, and the severity of the potential disruption. And I'm going to talk a little bit about those throughout this presentation. I was asked to add a few slides just about the general economy and to show how unprecedented these numbers really are. This graph shows the initial jobs claims throughout from 1967 all the way up until just a few weeks ago. At the depth of the Great Recession, we had 661,000 was the record number that happened on May 21st, 2009 in terms of initial jobless claims being filed. Last week, guys, can you forward the slide for me? One click. Last week, we saw 10 times the number of people file for unemployment. That's 6,600,000 people. In the last 3 weeks, 16,789,000 Americans have filed for unemployment. These type of numbers are not only unprecedented, there's no way to really understand what the long-term ramification of this is. And this is not a normal recession. Not everybody is being affected in the same way. Different sectors are being affected in disproportionate amounts of ways. When we take a look at the San Diego economy, I wanted to share some information with you on which sectors were going to be hit the hardest. If you look at who's being hit, we see industries like tourism. Tourism will be decimated for a long time, possibly measured in years and not just months. The retail industry, the restaurant industry, the real estate industry, anything to do with entertainment, personal services, haircuts, and nail salons, those type of things that require human interaction are all extremely impacted right now. That represents about 34% of the employment in San Diego. The sectors that are going to be hit less are healthcare, education, military, the government, software and biotech, utilities and transportation, and professional services like accountants and financial advisors, engineers. Those type of work can be done remotely. And that represents about 66% of our economy. So a full 1/3 of our economy is hit extremely hard by this particular disruption. Can you guys forward my slides? This slide is a slide that came from Goldman Sachs, and it takes a look at the change in gross domestic product over the last 20 or so years. And you see the Great Recession here. At the very worst, for quarterly loss, we lost 9% in terms of a reduction in gross domestic product, and that happened back in 2008. Next slide. Next click. These are the projections that Goldman Sachs put out just recently. They were looking at now a 24% decrease in the next couple of quarters, and then a very high increase after that. These are unprecedented volatilities. As you can see, there's nothing like this in history that looks like this. So it's going to be very interesting to follow this as we go forward. The good news is that this isn't going to last forever. At some point, we will recover, and it's just going to be a question about what that looks like. This morning, JP Morgan came out with a revised forecast. Their number went from 25% down to 40%. So we are still in a state where we really don't know what the impact is. Next slide. We've shown you this slide many times before. This is the Transnet Revenue forecast. This is the forecast that includes the 3.7 million people population adjustment from the Department of Finance. And the good news on this slide is that we still have 28 years of collection left in the Transnet Revenue forecast. And so we will be hit negatively in 2000, possibly 2001, depending upon the length of the recession. We may take a little bit of a longer hit, but we still have $15.3 billion in sales tax revenue to collect. And so we will be revising this forecast once we come out of this pandemic and understand what the ramifications are to the economy. Next slide. For the purposes of modeling, one of the things that we did was to take a look at the past recessions and just kind of use them as models for our forecasts. If you go back to the 1991 recession, you saw this blue line shows you the reduction in, or the collection of Transnet revenue. And what you see is that there was a dip in 1991, and it took us about 4 years to recover to the levels that we were at previously. And this is really a moderate recession. The 2001 recession was a mild recession. We never lost any ground in terms of sales tax collection, although the rate of increase did slow, as you can see. And then when we go to the Great Recession, which was a severe recession, it took us about 6.5 years to get back to the exact point that we were at before the recession, and it took us another 4 years before we hit the trend line. So almost 10 years to recover from the Great Recession in terms of sales tax collection. The reason I bring this up is that economists right now are very much debating what the shape of this recovery is going to be. And the shape of the recovery and the depth of the recovery are two of those key factors that are going to make the difference between whether and how much we lose or gain in sales tax revenue. Next slide. We've done collected information from our vendors, but we've also done primary research. We have staff calling the top 100 contributors to sales tax and asking them how this pandemic is impacting their businesses. And so we're coming up with our best estimates in terms of how sales tax is being impacted on a sector-by-sector basis. We're monitoring 28 different sectors. 17 of them are presented here on this particular slide. And what you can see is that the retail sector, apparel sales, department stores, furniture, for instance, have been hit extremely hard, losing more than half of their sales. Recreational products, et cetera, are hit very hard. Automobile sales, so anything in the transportation industry, is also hit hard. Most dealerships are closed down for new auto sales currently. There are some areas that are growing. They include drugstores, miscellaneous retail, which includes the online or Amazon type sales, food market sales, and liquor store sales are up to kind of balance this out. But these are some of the inputs that we have in our model. Hit this. Next slide. Next. And one more, please. This graph shows the impact on taxable retail sales. The dark blue bars show the actual taxable retail sales here in the San Diego region. And the light blue bars show what a forecast would be if the economy just continued to grow at the clip that it had been growing since the Great Recession. So that's what this graph shows. But people need to have jobs and they need to get out there and spend money. And so what I'd like to show you are a couple of scenarios on what the impact could be on taxable retail sales, depending upon the type of recession we actually go into. So one click, please. This first scenario shows what the impact would be if we had a 2-month disruption. And so the 2-month disruption really talks about the economy being disrupted from from March 15th through May 15th. So right now there are indications that we may open up at the end of April. That gives us another 2-week buffer on top of that. If we had just that as the disruption, and we had a V-shaped recovery, as you've heard economists talk about, we would lose about $10 billion in taxable retail sales over the next couple of years, and then we would move back to the trend line. Click again. This next line shows what would happen if it took us 3 months to get back and it took us longer to recover. And you see that the impact on taxable sales would be about another 50% loss. So we'd be up to about $15.9 billion, so almost a 60% additional loss. So you click again. This shows a third scenario where we would have a 3-month disruption, but instead of having a V recovery, as economists talk about, we would have something that would be closer to a U-shaped recovery. A U-shaped recovery would happen if we kind of stayed at the bottom for a while, and this is a possibility with all of the social distancing rules and regulations that we don't even know how they will impact the economy. If something like this happens, we could be looking at a loss of about $34 billion in sales tax revenue, and you see that it would also impact our taxable retail sales, and this would impact us for several years into the future. And finally, I'm showing a scenario here in red. So click one more time, please. That shows what it would look like if we shut down the economy for 5 months and that we went into a recession, and it took us essentially 10 years to recover, something similar to the Great Recession. And you see in a case like this, we could lose as much as $110 billion in retail sales. I think I got it working. Thank you. All right. Moving back to the Transnet revenue. So this is specific to our sales tax forecast. This is our pre-COVID forecast. So there's a blown up line from the slide that I showed you previously. You can see that we pretty much expected us to have a straight line increases from 2020 on. And then this is what happens with some of the disruptions. If we take a look at a COVID-only disruption, so that would be a 2-month disruption with a V-shaped recovery, we would lose about $28 million in sales tax revenue. This scenario would also assume that we really didn't go into a recession. If we went into a moderate recession, we would lose about $52 million in sales tax revenue, and we would come out of it sometime in 2022, fiscal 2022. A severe recession, where we were disrupted for about 3 months and we had a U-shaped recovery, would result in a loss of about $203 million in sales tax revenue. And just for comparative purposes, I will show you what it looks like if we went into something that mimicked the Great Recession. In that case, we would lose about $569 million in sales tax revenue, so close to $500 million. In addition to that, we've heard people say that this may turn into something like the Great Depression. And although I don't believe that this scenario is realistic at this time, this forecast shows you what it would look like if we fell into something like the Great Depression. And you can see that we're probably very far from something like this. But in a case like that, we would lose somewhere in the neighborhood of $1.2 billion in sales tax revenue. So we build our models kind of from the bottom up. We talk to the different industries. We try to understand what's happening at the actual business level. And then we validate these using independent forecasts. And this is similar to the process that we use when we do our Transnet revenue forecast. What we did is we went out and we took a look at every major economic firm that was doing a national forecast, and we took their forecasts, which are usually forecasts of GDP, and applied them to our sales tax revenue to take a look at how our model compares to theirs. So again, here is our pre-COVID forecast. When we take a look at the Oxford Economics forecast, and these forecasts were all released in the late May timeframe, they would result in a 2% decrease. There's word that Oxford will be lowering their forecast. IHS shows a -5%. UCLA forecast also shows a -5%. Moody's shows 7% down. The Wells Fargo forecast shows 9% down. Goldman Sachs shows 10% down. Deloitte shows 13% down. And then since then, Goldman Sachs has revised and they're down by 12%. The yellow dotted line shows you our forecast right now, the moderate forecast with a 2-month disruption with a V-shaped recovery fits right in the middle of these national forecasts. So I'm relatively comfortable that the information that we're using fits well with national forecasts, although nobody really knows what the end result is of this. We will be updating this on a regular basis as information comes in to understand what the long-term ramifications are. This last line shows what would happen if instead of having a V-shaped recovery, we had a longer-term recovery, and that would entail a $65 billion loss in revenue. When we talk about Transnet revenue, we are on a fiscal year rather than a calendar year. And so it's very difficult sometimes when you hear news reports to try to correlate that to what's happening with Transnet. If you take a look at fiscal 2020, we've done pretty well in terms of our sales tax collection for the first 3 quarters of fiscal 2020. There's something else you have to take into account, and that is that our sales tax revenue collections lag by 2 months. And so on April 21st, we will be receiving our payments, but those payments will be reflective of February collections. So as you can see here by the first orange bar, we anticipate those collections to be good, even though we are in the middle of this crisis. The revenue or the decrease in revenue that we see, the 50%, will occur, and it'll be associated with the month of April, and those payments will be made sometime in June. I guess whether it's a good news or bad news, the fact that this crisis happens over 2 fiscal years helps us buffer the 2 different years. So half of the crisis is going to be recorded in fiscal 2020, the other half is fiscal 2021. Most of the national forecasts, when you hear people talk, they're talking calendar year. So they're talking about what's happening in the calendar year 2020. So not completely comparable, but what I wanted to show you here is that it results in about a 7% decrease in 2020, and then about a 9.2% decrease if we're looking at a 2-month scenario in fiscal year 2021. This table shows you 40 of the scenarios that we put together with a probability and a likelihood of these scenarios happening. I've been asked to come up with a single number, and I think that that is really a fool's errand to try to do. And so instead what we've done is we've come up with probabilities that any one forecast would occur given the inputs that we've been discussing. So the way to read this particular table is that on the left-hand column, there are the different scenarios, starting with the COVID-only scenario, meaning we don't go into a recession. We would go into a mild recession with a V-shaped recovery, moderate recession with a V-shaped recovery, et cetera. So it's the type of recession on the left-hand side, and then the length of disruption. And that means when we get back to normal or back to work. The disruption right now is from March 15th through May 15th. That would be a 2-month disruption. And you see 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. This particular graph is color-coded, or this table is color-coded, and it gives you what we believe is the highest probability of these different scenarios happening. So right now, the highest probability would be that we would be back at work sometime starting in May 15th. We would go into a moderate recession, recovering back to baseline by fiscal 22. That would result in a Transnet sales tax reduction of about $51.9 million. I think equally as likely is that we won't be back to work until sometime in June. And so that would probably push us into a deeper recession with a longer recovery. So we're putting our bets on the moderate V-long 3-month recession, which would be a negative or a loss of $81.6 million. And even with those two, you see that the probability is not very high that would happen, maybe 15% for either one of those scenarios. So given what we know today, if we had to estimate what we were going to lose in Transnet sales tax revenue, my prediction is that we would lose with a 40% probability somewhere between $50 and $100 million, and with a 75% probability somewhere between $50 and $200 million. And again, we don't have enough information to really come up with a solid number yet, and we'll be updating this information on a regular basis as we have new data. This is the last slide that I want to show you. This slide compares fiscal year to calendar year. There's been questions I've had in terms of people asking if I can translate that. So this slide shows that. It shows some of the most likely scenarios also. The way to read this particular slide, and I've color-coded some of the data in blue just to make it easier to go through this slide. If you take a look at our prediction or our baseline forecast for Transnet revenue for fiscal year 2020, our forecast was $319.1 million. If we believe that scenario with a 2-month disruption with a V-shaped recovery is going to happen, that new forecast would show $297.5 million, or a reduction of $21 million in fiscal year 2020. The forecast would then show $298.4 million in 2021, rather than the $328 we had forecast, for a loss of another $30 million. And then we would be back to baseline by fiscal 2020 for a total loss at the very bottom column of $51 million. And so this shows you the different scenarios, and it also shows how wildly different some of them can be based upon what the assumptions are that one would make. We provide this information so that as you have, as you think about what might happen, you can take a look at this table and you can determine on your own what potential impacts there might be. So that concludes my presentation on the Transnet revenue and the brief update on the San Diego economy. And I'd like to hand it over back to Andre to finish up the presentation.
Okay, thank you, Ray. So as I mentioned earlier, we did have a draft budget for fiscal year 2021 completed. However, that was days prior to this pandemic. So I just want to walk you through the next steps that we are taking in order to bring back a revised draft budget to you at your May meeting. We have over 100 funding sources that are expected to provide the revenue for the approximate 350 OWP, operations, and capital projects that are currently in the fiscal year 2021 budget that is under development. Ray discussed the local sources of revenues that fund about half our budget. I would also like to touch on the other half of our funding that comes from state and federal sources. Staff has contacted our federal and state funding agencies who have confirmed that there should not be any near-term revenue impact in fiscal year 2021, as most of the funds have been previously appropriated. Both the state and federal governments are working on major spending packages aimed at providing public health and economic stabilization in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Policymakers are seeking to find solutions that will ensure the safety of the public and allow economic activity to rebound. The stimulus could provide additional resources to Sandag to support transit and various other eligible programs. For example, President Trump signed the CARES Act into law on March 17th, which includes $25 billion for transit agencies to help to prevent, prepare, and respond to the COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically, the San Diego region will receive about $314 million, which will go directly towards operating costs to maintain service and lost revenue to the virus. We will hear more details on this on item 10 on today's agenda. The CARES Act also includes relief for our cities, county, small businesses, public safety, and tribal governments, and we expect that support to continue throughout this recovery effort. And as Hassan mentioned earlier, there's a renewed focus on passing a major infrastructure package at the federal level as a means of helping with economic recovery going forward. This may help give us a jumpstart to many of the programs in our CIP, including long-term solutions for the Delmar Bluffs. Staff will continue to monitor the conversations in DC to see when those discussions might materialize as Congress starts to focus on more immediate needs for support to families, localities, and business. At the state level, Governor Newsom has taken several actions to support small business, and the legislature is poised to take up stimulus discussions in the coming months, and we are confident this will include a discussion of future transportation funding, including key infrastructure projects that could be used to kickstart the economy and keep our state moving. So as we continue to gather data with our economic team on the potential downside, we'll continue to monitor closely the potential upside with the state and federal stimulus packages, make revisions accordingly to the current draft budget before we bring it back to you at your May 8th Board of Directors meeting. So over the next several weeks, directors and program managers will be reevaluating agency priorities, including impacts of lower funding resources to help support these efforts. Project scopes will be redefined and adjusted to match the new level of resources that are available to us. Sandag will look at many cost-cutting measures, including reduced use of consultants as projects are potentially downsized or delayed. Instead, we'll rely more on available staffing resources to perform necessary work. In addition to reducing consultant services, you may recall over a month ago, Hassan had already informed the Board of Directors his intention to reduce staff by 10% using a combination of attrition and imposing a hiring freeze. This action will result in a reduction from 383 to 345 positions and generate a savings of approximately $5 million. Sandag intends to repurpose a number of existing positions to ensure the agency has the leadership, project management, and business support necessary to effectively continue operations. The compensation adjustment pool, which includes merit increases and performance bonuses equivalent to 4% of salary bases, has been eliminated. This resulted in savings of nearly $1.9 million. The planned 2.5% increase to salary ranges has also been eliminated. Now, there are no savings associated with this change, as the salary range increases would not have resulted in automatic base pay increases for employees. There are reductions to certain benefit costs that are directly tied to the number of budgeted positions. The only benefit cost increase is the CalPERS retirement, and that is based on contribution rates set by CalPERS. So today, this is an informational item, and we are not looking for any action. But we'll be back on May 8th when the Board of Directors is scheduled to review the draft program budget. We'll then be back to the board a month later on June 12th with our final Board of Directors budget. In addition, Ray and I currently provide the board with a quarterly market update report. During those quarterly reports, we are proposing that going forward, we also update the board on our budget and propose any potential amendments as needed as we receive new updates on funding levels. So that concludes our report. Ray and I will be available for any questions, so I'll turn it back to Chair Voss at this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Andre and Ray. Sobering. Tessa, do we have any public comment?
Sorry, Chair. No, there are no public comments on this item.
Okay, we'll move to board comments and questions. We'll first go to Mayor Jones.
Hi, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. It was great. Very comprehensive. So, you know, I understand that we took out the raises that were originally in our budget. But I think as far as truth and transparency goes, I think it's critical that we have justification and substantiate all of the aspects of our budget. And so one of the things that I'd like to discuss is that I'd like to figure out how we would move forward, having our independent auditor audit all of our salaries and our other compensation. I know internally in the city, we're really looking at, are we always in line with other municipalities and that sort of thing. And I think it's really important that at this point in time, with all of the things that are happening in all of our communities, we all recognize that, I mean, there are probably going to be people that are laid off. We've already laid off our part-time employees out of necessity. And so I think really to be able to substantiate and justify all of the things that are happening in our agency, I think as far as moving forward with this budget, I'd really like to see our independent auditor start working on this and, you know, justify all the things that we're doing and make sure that we're in line with other municipalities. So anyway, I'd like to make, it's not really a motion because we're just discussing this, but I'd like to have this as part of us moving forward. And so I'm not sure how I would do that, but that's my hope here today, that we do move forward with this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Jones. Mayor Dedina.
Yeah, I just want to thank staff for that sobering but honest discussion of all the known unknowns. I think what it highlights is the fact that we're all going to have to get behind obviously increasing the stimulus spending significantly, and hopefully that will be an ongoing process, and obviously an expansive infrastructure funding, and obviously both at the federal level, and then going beyond RENA at the state level to really make sure that when we get out of this, that the state is actually giving funds to cities like Imperial Beach and other low-income areas that want to build affordable housing and middle-class housing in all our regions of San Diego to really get that housing built and put people to work. So I think, you know, those sectors at the state level and federal level, what's going to help us get out of this, and we're going to have to really aggressively work with our congressional delegation and senators and then state representatives to make sure we move that direction, and statewide and obviously nationally. So thanks.
Thank you, Serge. Councilor Baber, it looks like you're self-muted. There you are. Councilmember Baber.
Regarding what Mayor Jones spoke, Chair, I don't know if our auditor is there on the line, but we can take a look at it. And I don't know if she has any response to that.
Just, Mr. Chair, this is Hassan. I think Mayor Jones' request was presented last time, and I believe the auditor said she will do the audit that's requested, and I believe Chair Pepper said it will take 2 months.
Hi, this is the independent auditor.
Okay.
Hi, Chair Voss. Yes, I have the audit request on the audit committee agenda in May, and then we'll get started on the audit, and we will try to get it done within the next 2 months. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again to staff for the presentation. And again, I echo the sentiment of the sobering outlook that the budget actually is looking to provide us all regionally, nationally, statewide, but even for our individual businesses. So what I'd like to ask staff, I think to Mayor Jones' point, just with information that we're being provided, I would love to get additional, just if staff can look at it, what funding is out there, whether it be CARES or if there's new statewide funding that you know, our statewide delegation is discussing, how we, and I say the regional we, but then cities and municipalities can actually get access to it. Any best management practices or ideas being tossed around on how to stimulate the economy. We can talk about, you know, what we've done in the past. Again, we need money in people's hands, so people to get jobs, to have money in hand, to then get spending. So I would love to see what exactly that looks like, and even if it's one or two ideas, so then that way we can bring it to our staff. And we have economic development folks, we have our chambers, we have other agencies that can help us kind of pull out more ideas. And then lastly, how we can work regionally to be even more aggressive for that funding when it comes, you know, again, stimulus package, but also to just being very purposeful and getting those monies to our communities. Thank you so much, Chair Voss, and thank you again for staff for the presentation. But those are just 4 additional points that as we look at the budget, yes, it is the numbers and how we bring in that revenue, but if we're thinking, you know, further how we can stimulate our economy, we can actually work on the ground to help make it happen. Thank you.
Thanks, Alejandra. Councilmember Schumacher.
Well, thank you very much. Was looking forward to this presentation. I want to thank staff, even though these are unprecedented times and the data is almost unrecognizable. I appreciate the attempt and the forward look. We know that this is going to be unique, and we also know, I think, that this agency, Sandag, will be a part of the economic revitalization, given the infrastructure projects that are in front of us, and knowing that large infrastructure projects tend to be what help our nation and our states during times like these, when there's recessions or deep depressions. So I want to caution my colleagues, when you're thinking about how we get through this time, to go immediately to staff cuts, because this agency is going to be a part of how we're able to move our region forward and shift into the economic revitalization. And we're going to need staff in this agency. In thinking about this, one of the things that there was a real brief slide that was presented, which started to take a look at, or started to kind of zero in on the cumulative impacts of our shortfall from the last few years, what we had taken a look at as far as where we were deficient, and then this would just add on top of that. So I want to, I hope we can continue to take a look at that as far as a cumulative impact for what we had previously as a shortfall, and then what we may be seeing moving forward. And then I want to encourage to prioritize and define projects moving forward. Where the timelines, are they just starting their studies, or are they near completion? Are they shovel ready? And then the relative impacts to traffic relief. And I really want to ensure that we're as a board getting a real sort of policy-oriented perspective and give direction to staff as far as what our priorities are as a board into this new budget cycle. And I thank you very much for your time and for the work of staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Corey. Mayor Haviland.
Yes, thank you, Chair Voss, and I too greatly appreciate the presentation here this morning. I wanted to see if, as you get more information about the governor's announcement that sales tax will be allowed, the governor allowing businesses to delay sales tax for a certain amount for up to a year. As you learn more information about how that's actually going to get implemented and the impact it's going to have, it would be really helpful to share that with the cities as you get that information, because obviously all the jurisdictions here are going to be significantly impacted by that as well. And just looking out my window and watching the water running down the hill and towards the bluffs, I'm alarmed that the study for the long-term placement of the rails has been put on hold, and I understand the reasons for that. But these long-term projects that our region needs, I hope will stay in our planning as much as possible, because eventually Mother Nature is going to win, and we're going to need to have a solution that's going to take many years to implement in place. And that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Supervisor Desmond, your hand was up, but now it's down. I'm not sure if you wanted to speak still. Jim?
I'm down. I'm good,
You're
thanks.
down. Okay. I see no other comment. Last call, then we're moving on. Thank you again to staff. Sobering, but appreciate the transparency and the cold hard look. Moving on to item number 7. This is proposed amendments to the bylaws relating to the Sandag budget process. Mr. Kirk.
Good morning, Mayor Voss and members of the board. In this item, we're asking the board to consider approving amendments to the Sandag bylaws in order to allow a greater flexibility in the board's budget consideration and approval process. Article 6, Section 1 of the Sandag bylaws dictates the process for the budget to be brought to the board. In the current language of the bylaws, it requires the board to approve a preliminary budget no later than April 1 of each year, and then to adopt a final budget not later than June 30th of each year. Per the board's request at its March 27th meeting, we've prepared proposed amendments to that section of the bylaws to give the board more flexibility in how it reviews the budget. A red line of those bylaw amendments is attached to the report as attachment 1, and the proposed amendments are at page 9 of that or page 34 on the PDF. The primary focus of the amendments is having the board consider rather than approve a draft budget by the April 1 deadline. At that point, upon considering it, the board can proceed in a number of different directions. The board could approve the draft budget as presented, again, only as a draft budget. The board could ask staff to return with additional information on either the proposed revenues or expenditures, or the board could ask staff to make revisions to the draft budget and return to the board with those revisions. The board would still need to meet that later deadline to adopt the final budget by June 30th, as this is required by our funding agencies. Another minor revision is changing the terminology from a preliminary budget to a draft budget to better reflect its nature as a document that can be changed. These proposed amendments were sent to all board members and alternates, as well as to the city clerks of all member jurisdictions. We have not received any comments about them. As before, once the budget is adopted, the board retains jurisdiction to revisit the budget throughout the year as needed. In the coming year, staff has committed to reviewing the budget with the board on at least a quarterly basis, and this will continue for as long as the board deems it beneficial. Our recommendation to you today is to approve the proposed amendments to Section 1 of Article 6 of the Sandag bylaws relating to the Sandag budget process, as those are shown in Attachment 1. That completes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have on the proposed amendments.
Thank you, John. Tessa, do we have any public comment?
We do not have public comment on this item.
Thank you. Mayor Minto.
I think this is a very direct, very simple way of addressing our concerns at the last meeting, and I would move the item. Are we going to wait and bring this back? I forgot.
Well, we'll, with your motion, and if we have a second and no problems with it, we'll move it to the consent calendar for the vote.
Okay, that's what I mean then.
Perfect, thank you. Mr. Zito.
Yeah, it seems an expedient way to do it. I guess one question for staff is that, you know, the existing language that's in the article seems to be structured in a way that ensures the member agencies get to see the budget in a preliminary form and provide feedback before final approval. And I don't see anything in the revised language that actually ensures that a preliminary budget will go out before the final budget is approved to the member agencies. Am I missing something? Is there something somewhere else that will
The
ensure
last
that?
line of the proposed amendment still calls on 2 rounds of sending it. The draft budget, when approved, and the final budget, when adopted, shall be filed with each member agency. So that would continue to be sent out.
Is there anything that prevents that from happening on the same day, though?
From the board, approving the draft budget on the same day that it approves the final budget?
Yes.
No, if the board sent it back, if it was presented to you in April and you requested revisions until the point where you approved both of them at the same time, it is theoretically possible they could happen at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm presuming that the member agencies on the board would complain if it happened, but I just think that's one minor flaw in the updated language. Thanks.
Thank you. Supervisor Desmond.
Mr. Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My concern with this is with the change. Like right now, we see it in April 1st, and then the preliminary, and then we approve the draft in May, and then we approve the final in June. With this proposed language, we potentially may only see the budget twice. Once in April, when we can decide whether or not we want to make changes on it in April, and then not again until June. So what I'd like to see added, I don't know if the maker of the motion is okay with this, but I'd like to have it at least come back and be agendized in May. Now, whether we do anything with it or not, but it basically gives us an opportunity in May to make any tweaks, because the way this is written, it potentially we get to see it in April, and then the next time it's agendized is not till June. So I don't want to, I guess, be put up against a deadline. Well, it's too late to put in this change or that change, because so I'd like to see, just add language to bring it back to the board of directors and agendize it during the month of May, so that we have the opportunity to before the deadline to make revisions and suggestions. Because if it's not agendized, then it's not.
I understand, Supervisor. And we could work that in, but really what this is doing is it's giving you control when you see it. You're mandated to see it no later than April 1st. And at that point, you can direct to bring it back every meeting. You can say these are the specific changes that we want. If you want it back in May, you can say we want it back in May and give that direction on April 1st. If you want to mandate that it comes back on a particular schedule, we could add that in, but then that's to an extent limiting the board in the range of discretion that the board would have in what it could do when it sees it on April 1st.
I don't think it would limit it. It would just be another bite at the apple. We have those 3 bites now. I guess what I don't want to do is give up that opportunity where we have to weigh in, because right now, you're right, we could say in April, but in April, if we come up with a change and maybe our staffs or our agency says, hey, we'd like to have this discussed or something in May, and then it's not agendized, I just want to make sure we have the opportunity to weigh in before the deadline, so we're not put in the box of here's the final thing, you guys didn't bring this forward earlier. And I just want to make sure that all I'm asking is that we agendize that meeting for potential input on the in May, so that we're not put in the box at the end of June for any changes. So
Supervisor, Jim, I'm happy to work with you as I've got the discretion to add things to the agenda, and I'm happy to work with you if we need another bite at the apple.
Well, I guess what I don't want to be doing is fighting, or I guess not fighting, but I would just like to keep the 3 looks that we have that we do have now. And I think it needs to be part of this language, because right now this is only 2 looks instead of the 3 that we've had. And I just don't I don't want to give that up for future dates and just say, bring it back, agendize it, and give us that opportunity, because right now that's not in this language.
Chair Voss, I would ask John to add the language. I mean, adding the language of having another, the board looking at the budget in May wouldn't change the intent of what John is trying to do, right, John?
No, it would not. And if I'm just trying to take a look at this, and I think some language that I could propose is that it would read, the Board of Directors shall consider a draft budget for approval not later than April 1 of each year and again during the month of May upon initial consideration, and then it would continue on.
And that should satisfy Supervisor Desmond's request, I think.
Jimmy,
I think that I think that would do it, and I appreciate the I'm not trying to change what we're trying to do here. I just want to make sure we still have the opportunities to weigh in. Thank you.
Let me go back to Mayor Minto. Are you okay with that revision with your motion?
I am okay with it. I guess when I first read it, I read into it that we could bring it back as many times as we want. Not that we would, but that we could. But I think that the language that Jim is asked to put in there still allows us to do it if we need to do it twice or 3 times or whatever. Is that correct?
John Kirk?
That is correct. You can bring it back as many times as you want and direct that when you see it under the current language.
Okay, well, I'm good with that amendment.
Okay, so Mayor Minto accepted that change to his motion, and Supervisor Desmond, is it fair to say then you were a second on that motion?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Council
members, yes.
I apologize. As a matter of clarification, if you're going to push items to the end to be voted on in consent, all of those items should be the subject of one motion. If you would like to vote on this item individually, it can have its own motion and second, but we shouldn't have a combination of motions and second with one vote.
Okay, thanks for that clarification. So never mind the motion from Mr. Minto and Mr. Desmond. Councilmember Schumacher.
Thank you very much. Is there the potential for doing a temporary bylaw suspension?
Council member, there is not. Under Robert's rules, board policies may be amended, but rules that are imposed by either bylaws or statutes may not be temporarily amended or suspended.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's all I had.
Mayor Vasquez, you had your hand up before. I'm not sure if you took it down intentionally or if it was up intentionally. There you go.
Oh, yes, I took my hand down.
Okay, thank you. I see no further comments or questions on that item, so we will move that with the changes to the consent calendar.
Council President Gomez would like to speak, Chair.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Council President.
Yeah, thanks. I actually wanted to speak on the previous one, but both this one and the previous items are tie. I want to first start by acknowledging staff for working pretty fast and bringing the previous analysis and now the amendment to be able to create a bit more of a flexibility to how we're going to be managing the budget, and I appreciate that. So thank you so much for doing the work. I just wanted to actually piggyback on the question that Council Member Schumacher made to Council related to postponing or amending our bylaws. You made mention, Council, that the Robert's Rules of Order doesn't allow it, but the declaration of the emergency by the governor has gave direction that Robert's Rules were going to be a bit more flexible. Have you looked at that, and how is that embedded into how we're doing business? Just want to make sure we're mindful of
Yes, thank you, Council President. The executive order, we have looked at it carefully, and it did specifically waive certain provisions of procedure that are applicable to public agencies. And that, for example, allows us to have these meetings by teleconference without the public being at every location, and some different things like that. But there is no specific allowance for what Councilmember Schumacher was asking about a suspension of bylaws.
Okay, thanks for that. I just wanted to make sure that we looked at it and how that impacted or not our way of managing things. So I appreciate that clarity. No, I think this is the right approach. As I stated last board meeting, I think we needed to do something different, just because seeing that the economy has been impacted and we're barely in the beginnings of it. So I truly do think this is the correct approach. So I really appreciate it. So thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Georgette. Seeing no other hands raised, we will move that to the consent and move on to item number 8, Regional Housing Needs Assessment Appeals Public Hearing Continuance. Seth Litchney.
Thank you, Chair Voss, and good morning, board members. On November 22nd, 2019, the Board of Directors voted to adopt the final RHNA methodology. As required by state law, Sandag staff distributed the methodology and draft RHNA allocation to each jurisdiction in the region and the state's Department of Housing and Community Development, which began the 45-day appeal period. Sandag received appeals of the draft allocation from the cities of Coronado, Imperial Beach, Lemon Grove, and Solana Beach. At the conclusion of the appeals period, a second 45-day period began for jurisdictions to provide comments on the appeals, during which time Sandag received 5 comment letters on the appeals, 3 from the city of Lemon Grove and 1 each from the cities of Coronado and Solana Beach. State law requires Sandag conduct a public hearing to consider the appeals and any comments on the appeals from jurisdictions. And on February 28, 2020, the board ratified procedures for the appeals hearing and scheduled the hearing for March 27th. In the subsequent weeks, the 4 appealing jurisdictions requested a continuance of the hearing. The request noted that preparation for the appeals presentation would require diverting their staff resources from their COVID-19 crisis response efforts, and expressed concerns about the adequacy of a teleconference or web meeting in providing opportunities for public participation. Initially, the hearing was postponed to the April 10th board meeting. As the date for the meeting approached, several factors, including the requests of the appealing jurisdictions, were considered to determine if the meeting should be held. Executive orders and federal guidelines issued to slow the spread of COVID-19 advise continued social distancing and remain in effect without any projection on when they may be lifted. To take the necessary precautions, the RHNA appeals hearing is being continued. I will now ask General Counsel John Kirk to provide the details of the continuation.
Thank you very much, Seth, and that's a good overview of what's got us to this point today. The action that's before you today is to continue the time for the public hearing on these 4 RHNA appeals until such time as an in-person meeting can be held consistent with state and local physical distancing requirements. This continuance was initially granted by the executive director pursuant to his authority under Board Policy 17 as an emergency action to address a situation threatening the health or safety of persons. That policy calls for such an emergency action to be presented to the board for ratification, which is what the action is today. In looking at the RHNA timeline moving forward, the government code lays out the timeline for each step in the RHNA process, including appeals hearings. The statutory deadline to hold the appeals hearings with allowable extension will expire on April 20th. So regardless of the action today, we will be beyond this deadline given the required 21-day notice for the hearing. We did speak with HCD about this situation in light of the COVID-19 emergency, including the prospect of extending the hearing date beyond the statutory deadline. HCD would not specifically say that this was okay or not okay, but what they did say is they really saw this as more of a local matter, and they don't see their role as enforcing the local appeals timelines. This is very important. Regardless of when the appeal hearing is held, per Government Code Section 65588, all local jurisdictions within the jurisdiction of Sandag must update their housing elements by April 30th, 2021. Whether we had the hearing today or we have the hearing a month from today, that deadline will still hold. And so all jurisdictions should still continue to conduct outreach and other actions as are possible during this time to be able to meet that deadline. So the recommendation that's before you today is the Board of Directors is asked to ratify a further continuance of the Regional Housing Needs Assessment Appeals hearing until such time as an in-person meeting can be held consistent with local and state physical distancing requirements. That concludes our report, and we're happy to answer any questions you might have on this.
Thank you both. Tessa, do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. Council President Gomez.
Oh, I didn't have a question, but since you called me, no, I didn't raise my hand on this one, so I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Georgette. Your hand was raised on my screen. You've got a random hand. Councilmember Zito.
Thank you, Chair, and appreciate staff for considering the requests from the member agencies that have been asking about this. I do think there's a lot of benefit to having an in-person meeting that can generate a robust and healthy discussion on where each one of the appeals are at. I did want to bring up that also that as per the letter that was circulated by the clerk, you know, and very salient with respect to John's comments on the HCD housing element deadlines, that the League of California Cities and some of the member agencies are also approaching the state and have asked for a continuation of that deadline. Some of the cities that are being pretty significantly impacted, which are many of the cities in Sandag, are going to have quite a challenge getting their housing elements updated in time, regardless of whether or not this appeal was considered, just because of the significant impacts to the potential zoning in the cities and the amount of time to do the necessary public outreach, and it's just not possible to get that accomplished in the current environment, as far as we can tell. The city of Solana Beach, for example, we did already have one public meeting, but we aren't obviously able to have public forums in a meaningful way at this point, and it's unclear when they'll start up again. So, I would like to, if we move this item forward, also include a request in that if necessary, to bring back to the board the request that the board take a position and Sandag could take a position asking the state to extend the deadline for the housing elements by at a minimum of 6 months, given the crisis that we're currently in, and also point out that does then better align the housing element update process with our extended regional transportation plan update process as well. And so that would be my request. Thanks. One more clarification. Sorry, Chair. One more clarification on that. The message that the clerk sent out indicated that I was asking for all of the things in that letter to be considered. I just asked the letter to be forwarded to be representative of what Solana Beach has asked for with respect to the housing element. I really wasn't asking for all of the items necessarily, although if the board would like to support all of them, that isn't the issue, obviously, but mostly was just about the board supporting and Sandag taking a formal position of asking the state to extend the housing element deadline by at least 6 months. Thanks.
Thanks, David. And Mayor Haviland, and Ellie, as you speak, could you back off your microphone a little bit? It's coming through pretty muffled, and see if we can improve that.
Yes, is this a little better?
No.
No improvement? Is it the volume or?
Yeah, you're pretty much last thing through, but go ahead.
Okay, I'll talk quieter. I want to echo Mayor Zito, Councilmember Zito's comments, but I also want to raise a concern if HCD is not going to extend our timeline. At some point, if this gets extended at Sandag more than a couple months, it's going to impact the housing element process that my city is going through. If our target housing number drastically changes 6 months into our process, that's going to cause further potential delays and costs to our city. So we are moving forward. We are doing everything we can. This is a top priority for our city. But at some point, we have to have a target, a reasonable, accurate target that we're shooting for. So is it possible to make a 2-month extension or even 3-month extension and then we evaluate, hoping that this pandemic will subside and allow us to meet in person again during that timeline?
I will have Mr. Kirk respond to you, and I think he also wanted to respond to Mr. Zito.
Yeah, looking at both of those, the board certainly retains jurisdiction to schedule these as it sees fit. The action today is to set a particular schedule, but taking the action that is recommended today does not preclude the board from modifying that schedule at some point in the future as it has in the past. Secondly, on Council Members Zito's request that Sandag take a position, I would just caution that that is beyond the scope of what's been agendized in this action, but that could certainly be put on a future agenda for Sandag's consideration, either as an individual matter or to perhaps amend Sandag's legislative program relevant to that issue.
Thank you, John. Mr. Zito.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to be clear. That is my request, that we take the action necessary so that we can actually go ahead and take a position, whether that requires it to be on consent or just some agenda in the future. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, David. I see no further raised hands. If there are no objections, we will place this item on the consent agenda. Well, now I see another raised hand. Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Hi there. Thank you. Again, to the points that have been made, I think it's extremely important that everything be couched in the COVID-19. Some of the concerns that were raised were issues that were raised pre-COVID-19. And so we have to be, again, recognizing that of the impact that COVID-19 has made. But we can't base our decisions on the NIMBYs or the people that were pushing back, before COVID-19 hit. So I just want to caution us again. Yes, we need to get the input in person, but also we're encouraging new engagement, whether it be online, over the phone, whatever that is. We can still move forward looking to address these needs because we know that the demand keeps growing, and even more so since COVID-19 hit. So again, we have to move forward in a very purposeful way. And yes, an in-person meeting would be best case scenario, but we need to not delay it too far because we want to stimulate the economy, and this is one way to do that. If we've got people building homes, we have the ability to get people in jobs, suppliers. So it's truly part, I believe, of the recovery effort for our future here regionally. But again, I will support it. However, we can't be so delayed in the process that and I don't want to say give the excuse, but we may not have the opportunity to do an in-person meeting. Then we need to really reassess how we do and engage our community at that future date. Thank you.
Thank you, Alejandra. I see no further hands up, so we will place this item on the consent agenda. Moving on to item 9, appointment of interim director of the Automated Regional Justice Information System, Melissa Kofeld. Welcome, Melissa.
Thank you, Chair Voss, and good morning, board members. Staff is seeking board support to hire retired Escondido Police Chief Craig Carter on a temporary part-time basis as the interim director of ARGIS. As you may remember, the former ARGIS director, Pam Scanlon, passed away earlier this year. This action is an exception to the agency's typical hiring practice and is due to a requirement set forth by CalPERS. Chief Carter retired in December 2019 and has not yet met the minimum 180-day waiting period typically required before an annuitant may begin work for a CalPERS agency. CalPERS allows a governing body to waive the 180-day wait period to fill a vacant, critically needed position on a temporary basis. It is staff's opinion that the interim director of ARGIS fits this criteria. Chief Carter has more than 28 years of local public safety experience. He served on the Sandag Public Safety Committee and has a good understanding of the ARGIS program. Chief Carter will help ensure the critical services that ARGIS provides to the local law enforcement community continue without disruption. A nationwide recruitment using the services of an executive search firm will be conducted to fill the director position long-term. Attachment 1 to your report this morning, starting on page 49 of your agenda package, summarizes the functions of the interim director role, as well as Chief Carter's operational and leadership experience. Attachment 2, which starts on page 52 of your agenda package, contains the resolution language required by CalPERS to waive the usual 180-day wait period. In considering this item this morning, the Board of Directors is asked to 1, adopt resolution number 2020-22, approving an exception to the CalPERS 180-day waiting period for work after retirement for Chief Carter, and 2, authorize the executive director to extend an offer of temporary employment to Chief Carter for the position of interim director of the Automated Regional Justice Information System. Cindy Burke, the Director of Research and Program Management here at Sandag, who has been supporting the ARGIS team in recent months, and myself are both available to answer any questions you may have regarding this item. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Tessa, do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item, Chair.
Thank you. And I should note, we are not able to vote on this one as a consent item. So I am happy to make a motion to approve this. When I was chair of Public Safety Committee a few years back, worked with Chief Carter, and it was an outstanding opportunity to get to know him and have every confidence that he can fill this on this interim and very temporary basis. Mayor Minto.
I would second that motion. I know Chief Carter. We're not, so acquaintances through the law enforcement. I think he's ideal for this. I think this is a perfect time for somebody with a law enforcement background to step in, at least temporarily, and see where we can maybe get some recommendations for some different ways of handling business, because ARGIS has been, moving along very well, but maybe it's time to jump off into some more dynamic ways of operating. So I certainly support that and second the motion.
Mayor Minto. Mayor Sotelo.
Thank you so much. for me, again, I would echo the sentiment of Chair Voss and Mayor Minto. All of us have sat on the Public Safety Committee. When it comes to what ARGIS is, we want somebody who understands the statistics and the perspectives of what data gets put into the system, but also to how it impacts our law enforcement. I was curious as to the impact to the suspension of our rules, and maybe this is a question for legal. I've been told that with many of healthcare professionals coming back into out of retirement, it's a more widely accepted policy right now because people are coming out of retirement. Does that same is that something that once we go back maybe outside of the COVID-19, we will then go back to our original policy and not allow people to, come out of retirement? I don't know if that's a fair question. But.
Generally, and I'll tell you that there was an executive order that specifically addressed waiving certain requirements for retired personnel from CalPERS to be able to come back without a waiting period. Because this really pre-existed the COVID-19 crisis, we felt it was most prudent to bring this to the board, to have the board vote on this, even though an argument could be made that it falls within the scope of that executive order waiver of those rules. That waiver of the rules also only exists during the pendency of the statewide emergency. And if that statewide emergency were to be lifted prior to the 180 days since Chief Carter's retirement, which I believe will be in June, then this would have to come back to the board anyway.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Kirk. Seeing no further hands raised, we have a motion and a second. Tessa, would you please take the roll call vote?
Councilmember Schumacher, City of Carlsbad.
Schumacher, no.
Mayor Salas, City of Chula Vista.
Salas, yes.
Mayor Bailey, City of Coronado.
Bailey, yes.
Supervisor Desmond.
Supervisor Desmond, yes.
Mayor Haviland, City of Del Mar.
Haviland, yes.
Mayor Wells, City of El Cajon.
Sorry, Mayor, you're muted again, self-muted.
He texted me his yes vote. So I'll register City of El Cajon as a yes. Vice Chair Blake Spear, City of Encinitas.
Blake Spear, yes.
Mayor McNamara, City of Escondido.
McNamara, yes.
Mayor Dedina, City of Imperial Beach.
Yes. Dedina.
Councilmember Baber, City of La Mesa.
Baber, yes.
Mayor Vasquez, City of Lemon Grove.
Mayor, you're self-muted.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Mayor Sotelo Solis, National City.
Aye. Sotelo Solis.
Deputy Mayor Feller, Ocean City.
Yes.
Chair Voss, City of Poway.
Yes.
You ready?
Councilmember Moreno, City of San Diego.
No.
Mayor Jones, City of San Marco.
Jones, yes.
Mayor Minto, City of Santee.
Minto, aye.
Councilmember Zito, City of Solana Beach.
Zito, yes.
And Mayor Ritter, City of Vista.
Yes.
That item passes with 17 of 19 jurisdictions. Let me, voting yes, and 2 jurisdictions voting no.
Thank you. Moving on to item 10, CARES Act, Federal Transit Immigration Apportionment Grant Applications. Michelle Smith, welcome.
Good morning. My name is Michelle Smith, and I am a Senior Financial Programming and Project Control Analyst here at Sandag. As stated in the earlier items, on March 27th, 2020, the President signed the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security, or CARES Act, into law. The Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, received $25 billion from this bill and is allocating this funding to recipients of urbanized area and rural area formula funds, with $22.7 billion to large and small urban areas and $2.2 billion to rural areas. These funds will be available to support expenses generally eligible under those programs to prevent, prepare for, and respond to COVID-19. As a metropolitan planning organization for the San Diego region, Sandag is the designated recipient for FTA formula funds and is responsible for approving the grant applications for the San Diego region. The CARES Act is providing additional federal funds for the transit agencies, with MTS receiving approximately $221 million and NCTD receiving approximately $96 million from the CARES Act, for a total of $317 million to help transit agencies in the San Diego region. Both MTS and NCTD plan to use the available funding for operations, which includes various expenses as stated in the report. Any expenses incurred as of January 20th, 2020 can be included, and this additional funding will help in filling the gap due to lost revenue. Therefore, the Board of Directors is asked to approve the submittal of the Federal Transit Administration, or FTA, grant applications for the San Diego region for the CARES Act FTA apportionments. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Tessa, do we have any public comment?
There are no public comments on this item.
Thank you. I see a hand raised from Mayor Salas.
Thank you, Chair Voss. So I wanted to speak to this item because I'm the chair of the Budget Committee for MTS. And I just wanted to let the board members know that these funds are vitally needed by MTS and North County. I'm sure that they're experiencing the same thing that we have. So, you know, our revenues are down 70%, and MTS already needs $20 million of this immediately. So even though this may seem like a lot of money, transit may need even more than has been appropriated. So MTS is looking at perhaps needing $150 million over the next 12 months. And, you know, we provide a vital service to the people of San Diego County. We are still carrying 100,000 people a day and more that are still riding transit on very necessary jobs, healthcare workers that still have to be on the line. So this is really an essential service. And, you know, our bus drivers are working so hard, and they're putting their health at risk when they carry the public. So I hope that the board is totally supportive of allocating the full amount that has been appropriated to both MTS and North County Transit District.
Thank you, Mary. I see no other hands raised. If there are no objections, we will place this item on the consent agenda and move on. Moving on to item number 11, proposed suspension of fast track monthly fees and registration holds. Ryan, you're up. Ryan Ross.
Thank you, and good morning, Chair and members of the board. So as the COVID-19 emergency has unfolded over the past several weeks, staff has been monitoring the service programs that Sandag operates, and we've been looking for opportunities to help and support county residents that are seeking relief due to the economic impacts that are being felt throughout our region. So the recommendation before you today is driven by just that. We want to be sensitive and understanding of how this crisis has affected the lives of many who typically rely on Sandag's services and facilities. One of the programs that's been most affected by the crisis and where we feel there's an opportunity to make some changes in order to help is with the Fast Track program. As a reminder and by way of background, Fast Track is the program that provides the ability for customers to use a single account and transponder to pay their tolls electronically within the region on SR 125, the South Bay Expressway, and also on the I-15 express lanes. Fast Track is also used statewide on all California toll facilities. Sandag currently administers roughly 85,000 Fast Track accounts in the region. Since the governor issued the shelter-in-place executive order on March 19th, we've seen traffic decrease on SR 125 by roughly 49%. And on the I-15, we've seen single occupant vehicle traffic decrease by roughly 66% from the same period a year ago. So in light of these drop-offs, staff has identified 2 business practices that we are recommending be suspended until the shelter-in-place order has been lifted. The first of those practices is a monthly account maintenance fee. This was originally instituted to cover program operational costs while also incentivizing minimum usage on Fast Track accounts. For most of our Fast Track accounts, this fee is $4.50 per month. But any usage by the account on SR 125 or the I-15 goes to offset that fee. So as an example, if a customer spends $4.50 per month in tolls on either SR 125 or I-15, then that fee is waived. Typically, the fee is only assessed to a smaller subset of our Fast Track account base, but during this current emergency, it's anticipated that more customers than usual could be faced with paying that monthly fee since they won't be meeting the minimum usage requirements. So to avoid these customers closing their accounts in order to save costs, staff is recommending that the monthly account maintenance fee be suspended until the shelter-in-place order has been lifted. The second practice is used by Sandag and the other toll operators in the state as an enforcement tool. And that involves placing vehicle registration holds with the DMV, where the vehicle owner must settle all delinquent toll payments before obtaining their registration renewal. So staff is also recommending that this practice be suspended as well in order to allow continued mobility for all vehicle owners that otherwise might not be able to pay their full amounts due because of the economic impacts of the health emergency. From a fiscal standpoint, making updates to these practices is expected to lead to a near-term revenue loss of approximately $125,000 per month that would have otherwise been collected in fees. But it's important to point out that if we don't take action and a large number of those customers close their accounts, then the cost of reacquiring the same customers in the future will be far greater than the near-term loss. I also want to mention that these fees make up a fairly small portion of the total revenue that we collect from the toll facilities. The fees make up about 2.5% of our overall revenue, and that by suspending these fees, it's not expected to affect Sandag's ability to continue meeting all of its obligations. So bringing me to the recommendation, the Board of Directors is asked to approve the suspension of the Fast Track monthly account maintenance fee and the practice of placing vehicle registration holds with the California Department of Motor Vehicles for overdue accounts until the statewide shelter-in-place executive order has been lifted. That completes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Brian. We have no public comment on this item. We'll go to board comment questions. Mayor Salas.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, staff, for preparing this report. I just would like to have the board consider an amendment to the original motion. I would like to add one addition to it. So everybody is suffering from this crisis, and we're all trying to figure out, how to make life easier for the people that are still going to work. So if you look at where the SR 125 is located geographically. And if you think about, say, healthcare workers or other essential workers that are traveling to other points in, say, Chula Vista or Otay Mesa, what generally happens if they're not using the toll is they'll get on the 54, they'll go all the way down to the 805, they'll make this big loop, perhaps get back on H Street to travel east again, or they'll go south to the 905 to get over to Otay Mesa. And so what's happening there is that they're using a lot of extra gas to make that big loop. Sometimes it increases their travel mileage by 10 to 20 miles a day if you're coming from Santee or El Cajon or Spring Valley or Hamul or those places. So the motion that I would like to propose is, the amendment that I would like to put in is to keep the two original points, and that is to approve the suspension of the fast track monthly account for maintenance fee and the practice of vehicle registration holds with the DMV for overdue accounts, but additionally to waive all toll violations until the statewide shelter in place executive order has been lifted. And there is actually precedent to this, because during the 2007 wildfires, the governor did waive the toll violations for people because he wanted to be able to have people to access toll roads and in order to get out of harm's way. So there is precedent for this, and so I'm asking that that additional consideration of the board, and I'd like to amend the original recommendation that way.
Thank you, Mary. I see no other hands raised. Councilmember Moreno.
I'm not sure if that was a motion, but if it was, I would be happy to second.
Okay, I will say if we have a motion and a second with the amendment, the proposal, something beyond what was agendized, we're going to want to vote on this as a separate item from the consent calendar, just to keep things clear. Any further comment? Please raise your hands.
Mayor Voss, I apologize. This is John Kirk, and looking at the scope of what's been agendized today, I have to caution about expanding the action beyond that, especially in the light of the nature of the financing of the toll road. The revenues are, of course, used to pay back bondholders. We don't own this without any kind of lien on it. In 2017, the board sold bonds to finance the toll road. And because we'd be proposing another waiver of fees that was not part of what was agendized today, the bondholders on this could object to that, saying that if I knew you were going to further restrict your revenues, I would have come and I would have lodged an objection today. So my recommendation is that that be brought back as a future separately agendized action.
So I'd like to respond to that, Chair
Go
Voss.
ahead, ma'am.
And that is that I could understand if we were, if we didn't have enough money in our overhead, our operating cost, nor if we have a huge surplus in the SR 125 budget. So if we did not have that surplus, I would agree with that. But you have a huge surplus, and for what better reason would it be but to alleviate some of the expense that's being borne to the driving public that would like to access the SR 125. So I wasn't going to make this a part of the discussion today, but since it was brought up about, well, how about the bondholders and our ability to pay them back? We've got $30 million in operational reserves right now, and I hardly doubt that we would use a fraction of that to take care of this motion today. And so Otherwise, I would agree with the council, but I don't agree with him now because of the surplus that's held in that fund. The other thing is it gives me the opportunity to ask the auditor to conduct an audit of those funds that are being collected and held within the SR 125 account. I'd like to know how the revenues are being utilized. You know, how come we're building up such a big reserve in there? And so I just don't agree.
Supervisor Desmond.
I understand both sides of this, and I'm hearing what the attorney's telling us, but I'm supporting Mary 100% on this item. Thank you.
Chair Voss, can I ask Ryan, with the added request of Mayor Salas, do you know approximately what will the financial impact be?
Yeah, Hassan, when I look at on average how much revenue we collect from violations. Now, keep in mind these are revenue totals prior to the current health emergency. But on average, on SR 125, we collect in the neighborhood of $475,000 per month from violations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ryan. Mayor Sotelo Solis. I think you are self-muted. Mayor Sotelo Solis. Let's go to Council President Gomez.
Hi, thank you, Chair. And I have a question related to the. Let me just start by saying that I'm supportive of what Mayor Salas is trying to do. I think it's the right thing to do. In relation to the violations, you said approximately monthly there's about $500,000 coming in, more or less. How much do we have in reserves?
So in our in the SR 125 reserves, we currently have there's a couple different reserve accounts that we have for the toll road. In our what we call our operations and maintenance reserve, there's roughly $30 million, and then in our capital expenditure reserve fund, there is $49 million. Keep in mind that in the capital expenditure reserve fund, a lot of those funds, or a significant portion of those funds, are allocated towards capital projects and future improvements on the corridor. But that's approximately our current balance.
Okay, thank you for that. And I asked that because, I mean, I mean, in terms of adding the violations and trying to prevent them, trying to waive them, I think it makes sense. Because what would happen if the folks that are getting cited, and they're not able to pay, what would happen to them?
So I think what we're proposing today as part of the recommendation is that the toll violations won't escalate. So some of the tools and methods that we would typically use, which involve things like placing holds on vehicle registrations, that those practices would no longer continue. So they would still receive the penalty for not paying for their toll, but that penalty wouldn't escalate like it typically would.
Okay. Thanks for that. Thanks for that clarification. So yeah, like I said, I'm supportive of the amended, the motion and the amended motion.
Chair Voss, this is staff. If our chief counsel think this is not a high risk, I'd like to say from a staff standpoint, we'll accept the change, giving that it is for COVID-19 and is only effective as long as the emergency stay at home in place.
Yeah, thank you, Hassan. Mayor Sotelo Solis.
Thank you. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, right. With the clarification from Edie Grata and with the points that my colleagues have made, I will be in support of the motion, and again, because it has that specific time period. So thank you again, and I call the vote.
Yeah, Mayor McNamara.
I apologize, but I'm a little confused, so I'd like to ask a clarifying question. And it's about the amendment of what we're actually doing. So, as I'm in support of the original agenda item, but what we're saying is that if somebody, the people who normally pay using the 125, they're going to continue to pay. And those who don't have the transponder, if they get a violation, they are excused from paying. Is that what we're saying here?
Mayor Salas? Nope, you muted yourself.
Yeah, so the way that I understand is this, because I have a fast track card, is that I'm assessed a fee each month whether or not I use the toll road, because they want to encourage ridership, right? There are some times that I don't use the toll road because I live way over on the west side. Okay, so I'm still being charged a monthly account maintenance fee whether or not I use the fee. So that part of the motion, that would be waived. Okay, and then the second part of it is if you have a violation and you have not paid it, then the DMV puts a hold on your registration and makes you pay until makes you bring your violation current until they reissue your registration. So we want to get, so that's the original part of the motion. The part that I'm saying that I'm amending is that we waive toll violations until the shelter-in-place executive order has been lifted. So I guess you're right in a way. If you've paid for your fast track responder and you've loaded it and you're going through, it's going to be deducting money from your account. If you don't have one and you're an occasional user and you're using it and you don't have the money, then you'll get a fine for that. Okay, so we're asking this, my amended motion is asking to waive all toll violations until the shelter-in-place executive order has been lifted. And so I don't have data on how many people would actually just find out, oh yeah, you can ride the toll road for free, so let's just go back and forth as many times as we want. I don't know if that'll happen. I don't know. But I certainly want to give people the benefit of the doubt at this point in time. I just attended a food distribution event here in the city of Chula Vista. People started lining up for that event at 4 a.m. in the morning. I got there at 7 a.m. We were not supposed to start food distribution until 9 o'clock. We already had, by the time I got there at 7 o'clock, we had already put in 1,000 people. That's all we had food for, is 1,000 people. They were put into a certain area, and there was a line waiting to get in, even though they couldn't get the food from Southwestern College all the way to 805. This is how people are desperately in need at this time. And if we can do anything to help them, then I think that we should take the responsibility as civic leaders to do that. So I really feel strongly about this.
Mayor Salas and Chair Voss, and I get it, Mayor Salas, and I think just to respond to Mayor McNamara's, the traffic is down 60% in other freeways and local streets. So if somebody chooses to take the toll road when the other freeways are 60% less than normal, so that's what we're talking about. During the COVID-19, the violator will be waived. And I think, to Mayor Salas's point, we think it's a fair point. I think it will have a financial impact, but we will deal with it. But from staff standpoint, we think the amendment is okay, unless the legal counsel told me I'm violating something. I would ask that staff recommend that you move forward.
Just to clarify, Mary, are you proposing waiving the penalty on unpaid tolls or waiving unpaid tolls and the penalties on them? Just want to have that clear. Mary Salas. Can we unmute Mary Salas?
Chair, she is self-muted.
Let's try that again.
Okay, there. Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess it would be both, because if you're waiving the toll violations, then then somebody would be having access to the SR 125 without having to pay tolls, right? I mean, it's one and the same.
Just wanted to clarify it. Thanks, Mary.
Yeah,
Mayor
thanks.
Minto. Mayor Minto. There you go, John.
Okay, thanks. I'm kind of with Mayor McNamara on this one. I'm going to play the kind of the devil's advocate here in a way, because I think maybe this is my law enforcement background coming out of me, but I can't support the amendment. And here's one reason why, because I think you could use the same analogy that, people are having a hard time. Let's forgive them for their fines and for their, fees on the roadway. Well, things are really bad. Service stations are down 65% and other sales are down 80%. So let's forgive people who walk in and decide they want to take, a table from a retail store, or go to the service station and pump gasoline without paying because times are tough. People have a choice to not drive on that roadway. And if they know they have to pay a fine and they decide to go on that roadway, if they have to pay a toll and they go on that roadway, then they should be expected to pay a toll. Just like I'm expected to pay for my coffee when I go in the coffee shop. Theft is theft, regardless of what you call it. And I can't support the motion. I know those are hard words that I'm using, but if you intentionally go on the roadway to defraud the innkeeper, which is us in this circumstance, then it's fraud and it's theft. So I can't support the motion. Thank you.
If I'm understanding it correctly, Mary's motion was based on making it easier for healthcare workers and first responders to have the most direct route back and forth. And I get that. I'm troubled a little bit, but I support it because I want to see them have the shortest distance between 2 points and make their life even just a tiny bit easier. Mr. Kirk, I know you wanted to comment again.
Thank you, Mayor Voss. Going beyond the issue that I raised, we did have outside counsel take a look early on in this crisis at potential waiver of tolls overall. And we took a look at how the bond indenture, the agreement that we have with bondholders, might relate to that. The bond indenture does allow on a limited basis what we could informally refer to as a waiver of tolls, a toll holiday. But it also, there's a few conditions precedent to that must happen. One is that Sandag itself must declare an emergency. It doesn't go into any more detail about conditions for a public emergency to be declared by Sandag. And secondly, because of other covenants that we have with Caltrans, we would need to consult with Caltrans before this could be put into place. Now, if the board's desire is to pursue this, what the board could direct is that the executive director take all steps necessary to pursue implementation of what Mayor Salas described, waiving toll violations. And at that point, the executive director could take the steps of declaring a public emergency and the scope of that involving the toll road, and confer with Caltrans prior to implementing the action that is described.
But if I understand it correctly, John, we're not, the addition to the motion is not waiving the tolls, but if somebody violate that, during the COVID-19, we suspended.
I think it's a fine point, and given the scope of the bond covenants, it would be my advice that you still take those preliminary steps, because it effectively is suspending our collection of those tolls. Again, because this has to do with bond covenants, we have a fiduciary responsibility on this that's unlike other actions that we take, where we have to be a little bit more careful. It's not to say that we can't do what Mayor Salas is describing. It's simply describing a few preliminary steps that we would take first to protect the agency.
Mayor Salas, would you mind if we agendize this for the next meeting to get some more clarity on what?
So first of all, yeah, I would love it to be agendized, but if we have to declare an emergency, then let's declare an emergency, because obviously there is. My reluctance is putting it off for another month is that people are suffering now and they need relief now. And I'd like to ask you, was there ever any other time where we had a toll toll holiday on the SR 125? In the history of the SR 125, was there ever any other time that we had a toll holiday?
No, not that I know of, unless the staff tell me otherwise.
Okay, well, again, I think that I would like to take the vote today, and we can agendize declaring an emergency, because I really think that we are in an emergency, and I don't think that we're going to come out of this anytime soon, no matter how optimistic some people may be. It's going to take a devastating toll for a very long time. I know the people that are suffering within my own jurisdiction, as all the mayors do in the jurisdictions that they're in charge of too. So again, I'm respectfully asking an aye vote for the amended motion that I've made.
But Mayor Salas, go ahead, sorry.
Go ahead.
I would say the issue here is we're not suspending the tolls, but any suspension of the tolls would require us to consult with Caltrans, since it may violate the franchise agreement. And John is saying for me to do that, we have to declare emergency and then do that, just to be on the safe side. Is that correct, John?
That's correct, Hassan.
And that's why I ask if you're okay. I mean, I obviously we want to do it. The staff recommend we want to do it. This is an unprecedented time, but we want to do it also and not be later sued for some violating the rules of the franchise agreement.
One thing that I might mention is, and I know that this has you've discussed this, but the franchise agreement and the indenture, the bond agreement, both relate to the collection of tolls.
Right.
If the agreement today was to waive any penalties associated with tolls and to agendize perhaps for a future meeting whether or not to waive the tolls themselves, that is something I believe we could do without impacting either our franchise agreement or the indenture agreement. and put the agency at less risk. Just another option.
Mary, any comment? Mayor Salas.
Oh, here I am.
There you go.
Okay. Yes, that's a good first step.
Okay.
So what we're saying is we would, the motion would be to add the penalty on the unpaid tolls, waiving the unpaid tolls after we potentially declare an emergency. Am I understanding, Mary?
Yes, so the language is to waive all toll violations until the statewide order is lifted. So that does not say to waive the tolls, it says to waive the violation.
Okay. At that point, I don't remember who your second was. It might have been
I think it was
Supervisor
Vivian.
Desmond.
Oh, I don't know. I can't remember.
Might have been Desmond.
Okay, great.
Supervisor Desmond, were you the second on this?
Chair, it was Councilmember Moreno with the City of San Diego.
Thank you. Councilmember Moreno, are you good with the slight change here? Councilmember Moreno.
Chair, I can't unmute her until she unmutes herself.
I think, Vivian, you might be self-muted.
Yes, I am the second. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion and a second. I see a hand up for Mayor Ritter.
I have a question. Is that waive all toll violations on just the 125, or is that on both the 15 and the 125?
I believe it's the 125 only.
Okay, but the rest of the motion, it applies the 15 also.
Yes, yes.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mayor McNamara.
All right, one more time. So if you don't have a fast track transponder and you get on the 125, you don't have to pay? Is that what we're saying?
No, you have to pay, but with no penalties if you're delayed paying.
If you're delayed paying. So, and because the part I'm not understanding is we don't really have a speed issue here, and the free alternative is actually a lot less cars on the road. So I'm not sure what and how many healthcare workers in comparison to those who are just going to say, hey, I can ride on the 125 for free. I personally, I'm just not seeing it. I mean, and I'm certainly in favor of helping out our healthcare workers and all of that, but I'm not really seeing what this is doing. And if we're doing it for the 125 because of the healthcare workers, then I think we should do it for the 15 because we have healthcare workers in North County.
Mayor Salas. Mary Salas. Are we self-muted? Mission Control, can you help?
Mayor Salas, you are self-muted. If you wish to speak, go ahead and unmute.
Mary, you're still self-muted.
Chairman.
Sir.
This is Hassan. So
Okay, I'm okay. Here I am.
We've got Mary.
Here I am. Okay, first of
Go
all.
ahead, Mary. Did you want to speak again?
Yes. You know, I just used healthcare workers as an example. I don't have an exact number. There are other essential workers besides healthcare workers. People that are producing food on the Otay Mesa. I mean, you could name a number of different things. And in regards to the tolls, yeah, if we can look at a broad strategy about, the same type of policy, system-wide. However, please keep in mind that the South Bay is the only community with a toll road. So I hope that you keep that into consideration as well.
Thank you, Mary. I see no further questions. Obviously, we need to we have a motion from Mayor Salas, a second from Councilmember Moreno. We will have to take this one as its own unique item rather than moving it to the consent calendar. Tessa, would you please undertake the roll call vote?
Councilmember Schumacher, City of Carlsbad.
Schumacher, aye.
Mayor Mary Salas, City of Chula Vista.
Mayor, you're self-muted again.
Salas, aye.
Mayor Bailey, City of Coronado.
Bailey, yes.
Supervisor Desmond, County of San Diego.
Yes.
Mayor Haviland, City of Del Mar.
Haviland, yes.
Mayor Wells, City of El Cajon, has indicated his vote is a yes on this item. Vice Chair Blakespear, City of Encinitas.
Vice Chair, you're muted.
Let's move on to McNamara.
Yes, Mayor McNamara, City of Escondido.
McNamara, no.
Mayor Dedina, City of Imperial Beach.
Sabina, yes.
Councilmember Baber, City of La Mesa.
Baber, yes.
Mayor Vasquez, City of Lemon Grove. I'll move on to Mayor Sotelo Solis, City of National City.
Sotelo Solis, yes.
Deputy Mayor Feller, City of Oceanside.
No.
Chair Voss, City of Poway.
Yes.
Councilmember Moreno, City of San Diego.
Moreno, yes.
Thank you. I received a text message from Vice Chair Blakespear, City of Encinitas, and her vote is yes. Can we please indicate that on the voting slide? Mayor Jones, City of San Marcos.
Jones, yes.
I also received a text message from Mayor Vasquez. Her vote is yes on this item. Please indicate that on the slide. All right. Mayor Minto, City of Santee.
Minto, no.
Councilmember Zito, City of Solana Beach.
Zito, yes.
Mayor Ritter, City of Vista.
Ritter, no.
That concludes the roll call vote. It passes with 15 jurisdictions voting yes and 4 voting no.
Thank you. Moving on now to the consent calendar. Need a motion and a second for the consent calendar, which includes the other items we move to consent. Supervisor Desmond.
Here, but on item 5, I wanted to offer a friendly amendment. This item I'm fine with it, what we're trying to accomplish, and that's that the executive director can grant time extensions. But what we don't have on this item is how long that goes for. He says he can offer, I guess, up to 12-month extensions. But what I'd like to have added to this item is this authority would revert back to the board of directors when the statewide shelter-in-place order is lifted. So there's no end date on this item 5. So I just want to, I'm fine with what it's doing, but I want it to end the authority come back to the board when the shelter-in-place by the state is lifted. So with that,
okay,
I'll move the consent calendar with that amendment. And I just want to make sure that on item 6 that I guess Mayor Jones had asked for a comparison audit for our employees as they compare to other government agencies. I just want to make sure that was included in item 6. And if that's the case, then I'll move the consent calendar, I guess, items with the amendment on 5.
Okay, thank you. Mayor Minto.
And I'll also second the amendment.
Okay, thank you. I see a few other hands up. Mayor Jones.
I just wanted to make sure that was the independent auditor auditing the staff salaries and compensation, their compensation. I just wanted to make sure that was completely understood.
Okay. Mayor Sotelo-Solis.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Okay, so we just did 2 other items because they had amendments. We pulled them out and understood that these 2 items are consent. So because we are editing, do we need to have individual votes on both of these for clarification, Mr. Chair?
Mr. Kirk, would you speak to that?
If the board members are clear about what the scopes of the amendments are to these items, then they may still be considered as part of the consent agenda. So I believe right now on item 5, that is moved with a proposed modification of the staff recommendation. That's the Transnet grant programs. And on item 7, there was a modification to the staff recommendation on the bylaw amendments. That is included within the consent agenda. On item 6 on the budget, that was a discussion only item with direction to the auditor, which is within the scope of any board member. That was just a discussion item though. The other 2 items, item 8 and item 10, are moving forward on the consent agenda as a staff recommendation.
Right, okay. Now with regards to waiver of review of the time extension, Mr. Chair, with the maker of the motion, he mentioned the shelter in place. I would be, at least for the, till the executive orders of emergency, emergency declaration be lifted. I don't know, because sometimes the language is different. So I want to make sure that it's the emergency declaration and not just the shelter at home orders. And I'd be willing to support if the maker of the motion just clarified that. And then secondly, with regards to the auditing of the salaries, isn't that part of the audit committee's discretion? So and all of that information is part of our budget decision making, just for clarification, Mr. Chair.
Just to, I can respond, Mercedes, our independent auditor can audit anything, and she already said that she's gonna do the stuff, and she's gonna take her 60 days. So, but she can audit anything she wants to by taking it to the audit committee. And if Mary's there, she can speak to that.
Great. Perfect. That's great. And then just for then, thank you, Hassan. Mr. Chair, the clarification for the maker of the motion, the waiver of review for item 5, that it be the lift of the emergency versus the shelter in place.
Let me have Supervisor Desmond respond.
Well, quite frankly, the reason I had the shelter in place is because that was the same, I guess, restriction on item 11 that had the shelter in place. So I was trying to be consistent with that item, which was the, I guess, the fines on the tollways. So I was just trying to be consistent with that, and I'd like to leave it where it is right now, unless we hear a whole bunch of other angst. But I think that was my whole intent of why I chose those words.
Yeah. Okay.
Thanks,
That's fine with me. Again, just I wanted to make sure we had the same language, and if that's the reason, I will support the motion. I'll second the motion if it hasn't already been seconded. Thank you.
Yeah, it has been seconded. I see no further hands up. Tessa, did we have any public comment on consent?
There is no public comment on the consent items. And could you please confirm who's on record as the second to this motion by Supervisor Desmond?
I believe it was Mayor Minto. And with that, if we could please have the roll vote.
Thank you. On item number, on the consent agenda, Council Member Schumacher, City of Carlsbad.
Schumacher, aye.
Mayor Sellis, City of Chula Vista.
Dallas, aye.
Mayor Bailey, City of Coronado.
Bailey, yes.
Supervisor Desmond, County of San Diego.
Desmond, yes.
Mayor Haviland, City of Del Mar.
Haviland, yes.
Mayor Wells, City of El Cajon, has indicated via text that his vote is yes on this item. Vice Chair Blakespear, City of Encinitas.
Blakespear, yes.
Mayor McNamara, City of Escondido.
McNamara, yes.
Mayor Dedina, City of Imperial Beach.
Dina, yes.
Councilmember Baber, City of La Mesa.
Baber, yes.
Mayor Vasquez, City of Lemon Grove.
Mayor Vasquez, yes.
Mayor Sotelo Solis, City of National City.
Sotelo Solis, aye.
Deputy Mayor Feller, City of Oceanside.
Yes.
Chair Voss, City of Poway.
Yes.
Councilmember Moreno, City of San Diego.
Yes.
Mayor Jones, City of San Marcos.
Jones, yes.
Mayor Minto, City of Santee.
Minto, yes.
Councilmember Zito, City of Solana Beach.
Zito, yes.
Mayor Ritter, City of Vista.
Ritter, yes.
That concludes the vote on the consent agenda. This item passes unanimously.
Thank you all. We have no further continued public comment. And with that, our next board meeting is currently scheduled for Friday, April 24th. I will be working with staff. If no essential items are identified, we'll be canceling that meeting. We'll keep you posted on that. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you all so much. Stay safe, stay dry, keep your distance.